Welcome to the very best part of my broadcast week. Let me apologize in advance for the show. Not the content. The content's going to be great, like it always is. But sometimes, when we do this show, they have a timeless quality. The show can run anytime, and it's always good. Sometimes it's a heavily time-stamped show. This week is a time-stamped show. We are right in the flow of events. And by the time you catch this show, some of the things you hear, well, they may have already been overtaken by other events. We're going to take that chance because, like I said, we're in the middle of the stream of news as it is happening. And what is the news that is happening in Washington today? The ongoing Republican majority quest to find a Speaker of the House of Representatives. Not a typical kind of quest this deep into a Congress, but that's where we are. And someone who's going to help us, to the degree he can, navigate what comes next is Ken Buck, Republican Congressman from Colorado. Ken, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, Congressman, is Jim Jordan, the current nominee, Speaker designate, ever going to be Speaker of the House?
I don't believe he will, no.
Why?
Well, he doesn't have the votes.
Point one, he doesn't have the votes.
Right. He is missing, he started out with 20, he's now down 22. I think he'll be down 25, 26 if he goes to the floor again. There are a number of alternatives that I think make sense, and at some point, I think Republicans start looking at those. There's the possibility of a temporary speaker, a 30-day, 60-day speaker who would have full authority to bring an Israeli supplemental bill to the floor, a Ukraine supplemental bill, a spending bill. We're 30 days away from a shutdown again in the federal government. So we have to have a speaker, and the speaker has to have full power to make things happen.
Right.
So that's the number one option. And the number two option is that there's a power-sharing agreement. The Scalise forces, the McCarthy-Jordan forces, others get together and just decide, you get speaker, you get this, and we need to move forward.
Right. Okay. That's a lot to sort out. And I want to remind our audience, we're recording this on October 18th. Just hours after the second vote on the floor of the House, deciding whether or not Jim Jordan would be Speaker. And as Ken Buck just mentioned, the first time that vote occurred, yesterday, October 17th, he was 20 votes short. Hours ago, he was 22 votes short. Do you think that margin is only going to increase, meaning Jim Jordan will, if there are more votes, continuously fall shorter and shorter of the magic number of 217?
I think he bleeds 3 or 4 votes this next time, maybe a little bit more if he goes to the floor a fourth time. What he's counting on, there's a lot of grassroots support for Jim Jordan. So the phones are ringing and people are making demands, and there are a lot of members who have folded as a result of that. But more and more members are going to be able to say, I voted for him the first 2 times, now we have to move on and find a speaker.
Right. And in general, Ken Buck, does that kind of outside pressure in a leadership election like this typically work? Or does it run the risk of backfiring?
It doesn't work with me. But
it doesn't work with you, not personally.
But it does work with some other members.
Okay.
Yeah, they're concerned about a primary from the right.
Yep.
They get these calls. They take them very seriously, and they fold.
Has in any cases it backfired? Do you know of members who were like, wait a minute, get out of my face. This is a decision I'm making, and this pressure is only digging me deeper into where I'm at.
It's even worse than that. Some of them are saying, get out of my face, and I'm voting against the person you want me to vote for because I'm so offended that this is happening.
Right. Why is it that you are so confident that, in your words, Jim Jordan will continue to bleed votes?
Well, he will continue to lose votes because there are more and more people out there who felt they gave him the chance.
Right.
And he should not be putting people
that it was
through
a tough
this.
vote for some of them in the first instance and maybe the second instance, but after that they've got to say, look, other options must be pursued.
So, Major, let's back up a
Sure.
step here. The
Please.
first thing that happened in our conference was there was a vote between Steve Scalise and Jim Jordan.
Right.
And Steve Scalise won that vote. And the Jordan people blocked Steve. Steve knew he was going to lose by 12, 15 votes. He wasn't going to the floor, and he wasn't going to force people to vote for him under those circumstances. So as a gentleman, he decided not to go to the floor. Now those people that supported Steve Scalise are looking what Jim Jordan is doing and saying, wait a second, we gave you 2 votes on the floor. You were 20 votes and 22 votes short, and Steve Scalise did the right thing. It's time you do the right thing. And so that's part of the motivation for people to move away from him.
Do you have any sense, Ken Buck, that Jim Jordan will quote-unquote do the right thing and bow out?
Well, I don't. So back up again. This is really Jim Jordan's only chance to become Speaker.
Right.
All the stars have aligned in a way that he is the nominee and he's on the floor. So if he backs out, it's not like Kevin McCarthy backing out 5 years ago. If he backs out, in his mind,
it's over.
It doesn't happen again.
Right.
So he's going to give it every opportunity. Now, maybe Scalise becomes Speaker and Jordan becomes Majority Leader and Jordan puts himself in a position so in the future he could become Speaker. Maybe something like that happens. So I wouldn't call it bowing out, but I think in Jim's mind and in his allies' opinion, there is a way to keep this alive, not necessarily as Speaker this time, but keep the dream alive.
If I hear you, Ken Buck, you're saying it's not over for Steve Scalise.
It's not over for Steve Scalise, it's not over for Jim Jordan.
Is it over for Kevin McCarthy?
Is it over?
For Kevin McCarthy?
Oh, absolutely not. The whole Jordan play has Kevin is supporting Jim and opposing Steve. And the whole play is that Kevin is the one with the money. Kevin is the one that's been fundraising for 5, 6, 7 years. He has the pot of money. He's going to go out and help members who are going to support him for Speaker in the future. This is three-dimensional chess.
Yes, it is. The reason I ask is Mike Lawler, who you also know, part of the No Coalition against Jim Jordan, was on this program last week, and he said it is not out of the possibility that Kevin McCarthy could come back into this role. Do you agree with that?
I think it's not out of the realm of possibility. I think it'd be very difficult for Kevin to not have 4 people against him when he had 8 people against him earlier.
Right, exactly. If you were to try to game plan this out for my audience, do you think Steve Scalise has a better chance or Kevin McCarthy has a better chance as you look at things right now, knowing it's fluid?
So as things exist right now for this week, I think Steve Scalise has a much better chance than Kevin McCarthy.
Right. What does this all mean to the House Republican majority? When the opening prayer was read this morning, the chaplain of the House described a cacophony of chaos. That's not a good look, is it?
Bless her.
You're not going to go bless her hard, are you?
No, I stopped short of the Southern saying. I just said bless her. So it's not a good image, number one. Number two, the reality is we've got 20 Republicans in Joe Biden districts. The chances of us keeping the majority are not great to start with. Then you take a vote for Jim Jordan in a Joe Biden district. Jim Jordan, who denies that Joe Biden has won the election. Jim Jordan, who denies that Trump lost or that even the electoral votes had to be counted in the way that they were counted. Jim Jordan, who has taken votes against certain aid packages to New York and other places, like the Superstorm Sandy vote.
California wildfires.
Right. So there are a number of people who are in tough districts who, with Jim Jordan as Speaker, are even tougher districts.
Right. And some of them cast votes in his favor the first and second time around. Some of them took some hard votes, were team players. But if I heard you correctly, you're saying some of those team players are going to walk off the field and say, I gave you 2 votes. You can't ask me for any more than that.
That's correct.
That's what's going to happen.
Yes.
Do you think Jim Jordan knows that?
Yes. I just got off the phone with the folks who are closest to Jim, and I think he understands that there is very little chance for a pathway forward. So now, does he let the grassroots continue to hammer away and hope that because once it turns and he starts gaining 3 or 4 votes, then he calls for another 5 or 6 votes in hopes of hammering people into submission.
As you know, ladies and gentlemen, lots to digest here. We're going to do it, and we're doing it in real time. Time-stamped, as I said at the top. Ken Buck, Republican from Colorado, is our guest. Major Garrett, Takeout, segment 2 in a second.
There is a lot of testosterone.
Okay.
There's no doubt about that. And a lot of it is from folks who aren't used to this process.
Welcome back to the Takeout. The sounds you hear around us and the atmosphere, it's Santa Rosa Taqueria, very near Capitol Hill. Has to be near Capitol Hill. I mean, come on, all the drama is on Capitol Hill, at least in America. There's drama elsewhere. We'll get to that, I promise. Ken Buck, Republican from Colorado, is with us. So, in your conversations, Congressman, are you suggesting this sort of power-sharing thing, Scalise Speaker, Jordan Majority Leader, and is that something you'd get behind?
Well, it is not my first option. My first option is to have a 30-day, 60-day temporary speaker.
Okay.
Then we go into conference every day if necessary, and we have a family conversation, and we try to figure out what is the best move for us.
Okay. This idea of enlarged powers for the Speaker pro tem, currently occupied by Patrick McHenry. I watched on C-SPAN right after the end of the vote that did not elect Jim Jordan Speaker for the second time. Chip Roy, a congressman from Texas, a colleague of yours,
And
say on the steps of the House that he was, and this is a direct quote, violently opposed. Let me repeat those two words, violently opposed to expanding temporarily the powers of the Speaker pro tem. What does that tell you?
What it tells me is that he is a Jim Jordan ally, and that he wants to make sure that the focus is on Jim Jordan and not on alternatives to Jim Jordan. And that's fine.
Does the word violently bother you?
Not from Chip.
Okay.
Chip uses a lot of flowery language, and that was probably the cleanest.
What do you think he means by that?
Well, I think he just is opposed.
Okay.
And he is going to be...
I've interviewed, Chip's been on this program. I've talked to Chip many times when he was a staffer and now as a congressman. And right, he uses emphatic language. But in the context, it struck me as worrisome. Am I reading too much into it?
Yeah, you're reading too much into it. Chip is just saying that he is adamantly opposed, and I get that. He doesn't want people
And I guess the reason I mentioned that, Congressman, is that people have told me in the last couple of weeks that it has felt very fraught in these Republican conference meetings, that there was a nervousness about people getting really angry with each other. And like, we almost saw fisticuffs on the floor of the House in the protracted process to elect Kevin McCarthy Speaker. People have told me that it feels aggressive now, that people wonder if people are going to start slugging one another.
Well, there is a lot of testosterone. There's no doubt about that. And a lot of it is from folks who aren't used to this process. A lot of us can sit back and say, you know what, the sun's going to come up tomorrow, and we're going to move forward. And there is no
America will continue.
Yeah,
Congress will continue.
We survived a lot of presidents that
this isn't as primal and existential as you're making it out to be.
And we haven't received that aid supplemental request from the White House for Israel. We haven't. It's not like there are things that are sitting there that we've absolutely got to get to in 10 minutes.
But they're coming.
They're coming, and we'll have a speaker. Mm-hmm. And I'm not violently opposed to any plan that moves us forward.
So describe for my audience, and again, this is a timestamp thing, but you may be hearing a lot more about this in the not-too-distant future. So let's get into it. What do these enlarged powers for a temporary Speaker pro tem look like, and what is the means by which to actually have them occur?
So what is a Speaker pro tem? A Speaker pro tem, if something were to happen to the Speaker makes a list of 5 people. And those people are called in order to become Speaker pro tem.
That's the post 9/11 creation of the House.
That is exactly how it happened. And so we've got this list, and I think there's even a series that is based on having a list like this. We have this list, and
designated survivor.
Right. Patrick McHenry was the top name on the list.
Right.
His only function is to get a permanent speaker in place.
Right.
So that's what the Speaker pro tem's job duties are. So what we would do, in effect, was to say, okay, we will elect Patrick McHenry, and he will agree to resign in 30 days or 60 days so that we can move forward with legislation and at the same time figure out who we're going to pick as a permanent speaker. So if he doesn't resign, we have a motion to vacate. We can take him out. But he's agreed, and somebody honorable like Patrick would never.
There's no doubt in your
that.
mind that Patrick McHenry would
That's
live
right.
up to that if, in fact, that were to happen. But he said he's not in favor of that. He says he doesn't want to do that.
Because he doesn't want to take the focus off of Jim Jordan either. He didn't want to take the focus off of Steve Scalise. So nobody wants to say.
Or Kevin McCarthy. He wasn't one of the
Right,
guys
right.
wanted to disrupt the leadership at all.
Right. So the idea that Patrick doesn't want it is only because there are some options that he needs to focus on. Once those options are taken off the table, I think that he would be a good person to do that kind of job.
Mm-hmm. And the House could function in a orderly way under this. Would this require any votes from Democrats to make this happen?
First, answer the first part of the question. The House has never been orderly, so I don't
True
know
enough.
that it will function in an orderly fashion. But second, yes, it would require Democrats to vote for it.
Because
there's always going to be 30 Republicans who vote against something
The Freedom
like this.
Caucus members, the hardliners, are probably never going to go for this.
Well, I'm in the Freedom Caucus. I will vote for it. There will be
Okay.
other Freedom Caucus members who will vote for it. But across a group of 220, you're going to get 30 that aren't going to agree to it.
And this is an interesting legal question, Congressman Buck. The House, if it votes to change its rules or establish its rules, those are the rules. And the question might arise, well, is this constitutional? Well, Chip Roy, also speaking on the steps of the Capitol, said it's not constitutional. All the Constitution says is the House will choose a speaker, not empower a speaker, and on that basis, people would sue to stop this. What do you think would happen there?
It depends how you did it. As I suggested, we're actually choosing Patrick McHenry as Speaker.
Fulfilling that constitutional
Right.
mandate.
Right. And I believe that even in that case, he would get Democrat votes and Republican votes. He would be the Speaker, and he would agree. I'm giving the Republican conference 30 days, 60 days to find a Speaker. If they find it in 10 days, I'll resign, and you can have a Speaker in 10 days.
Right. And on that basis, with the House so voting, you believe it would be legally defensible and
Oh, there's
consistent
no doubt.
with the rules of the House and the precedent of the House.
We're going to go through the same procedure that we would go through to elect Jim Jordan Speaker, just with somebody who says, I'm only there temporarily.
Now, Congressman Buck, I've talked to Democrats about this idea, and they say, sure, but not without some concessions. We're not going to grant Patrick McHenry effectively the same powers that any other elected Republican speaker would have if we don't get something out of it. Are you open to giving Democrats something that they might want in exchange to create this temporary empowered Speaker pro tem?
And I don't know what that would be. The Democrats
Maybe changing the ratios on the Rules Committee.
those ratios have existed for 100 years, so I doubt that's going to happen. But
Okay, but that's one of their asks.
yeah, it may be one of the asks of some people. There are a number of people who have come to me and said, we want to move on. This isn't good for the country.
What have they said to you in general?
This isn't good for the country.
Right.
We'll support somebody. Period. End of story.
They'll support it.
Right.
Carte blanche. Just to move, but do they want assurances about what legislation will come to the floor?
No, they haven't asked me for that.
Okay.
Now maybe as we get closer,
They
then,
might.
Right.
Now, would you be supportive of a supplemental for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan, as the minority leaders, Senator McConnell has indicated might be coming?
I would be supportive of a supplemental for Israel, a supplemental for Ukraine, and a supplemental for Taiwan or the Pacific Rim more
right.
generally, together or separately.
Would border security need to be a part of any one of those, or would you imagine a scenario in which all four are put together?
I think if you put border security on there and it is too onerous, you lose Democrat votes and you don't get any of them. And so I think that all of those, I think all four should happen, and in whatever way we can make those happen, it should. But clearly there is a crisis at the border that needs to be addressed.
Right. And before we go to break, on decisions about what is or isn't and how it comes to the floor, who would make that if there's a empowered temporary Speaker pro tem? Would the majority leader, Scalise, make that decision?
Yeah, clearly the Speaker is in charge. When you say you've got full Speaker power, the Speaker is in charge. The majority leader runs the floor. The Speaker determines what comes to the floor. And in fact, if need be, the Speaker can even run the floor. I mean, the Speaker is the Speaker.
Yeah.
And I've found that out the hard way sometimes.
Very good. That is the voice of Ken Buck. As I said, lots to unpack here. We're going to get to some of the international arena crises here in a second, but a couple more questions on the mechanisms to be teased out in pursuit of a Speaker of the House of Representatives. I'm Major Garrett, segment 3 of the Takeout in just 1 second.
I don't know that he is an existential threat to America, but I think that...
you think he's pretty close?
I think America could do a lot better.
Welcome back to the Takeout. Welcome back to Santa Rosa Taqueria. We're not eating. We're too busy for that right now. We're just having a little water, but folks around us are eating, enjoying things. That's the way the show works. You know the atmospherics around the Takeout. Ken Buck, Republican from Colorado, is our guest. And I want to dig down on one thing before we move on to Israel, Ukraine, and other issues. You asked a very important question, it seems to me, since I wrote a book about it, the election of 2020. To Steve Scalise and Jim Jordan. For the benefit of my audience, what was the question? What were their answers?
I asked, would you publicly and unequivocally state that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election and Joe Biden won that election? Both of them said to me, well, I'm concerned about what the Secretary of State in Pennsylvania did, and I'm not sure what happened in Georgia. And, Wisconsin was a whole different story. Neither of them would say yes or no. It's a pretty straightforward yes or no question. So they both hedged on that. Then French Hill came up, and he asked an even more straightforward question. He said, did Trump win the election? I'm concerned about the Secretary of State in Pennsylvania, what's going on in Wisconsin, and neither of them would answer the question then. And really one of the reasons why I am not able to vote for Jim Jordan is not only did he vote to decertify the election, I wouldn't have much choice of who would be the speaker if I could only choose a Republican like myself who voted to certify the election results. I wouldn't be able to, but one of the problems I have with Jim is he went beyond that, and he was involved in,
had a lengthy phone conversation with the President of the United States leading up to January 6th, which he still hasn't described the contents of or the purpose there behind.
Right, and he had members there who were actually going on social media and using other ways of trying to move the crowd from the mall to the Capitol. He was advocating on January 5th with Mark Meadows, sent him a text with an attachment on how electors could be decertified and asking Mark to talk to the vice president. So there's a lot more there than just voting to decertify, and that's one of the issues I've got with where Jim is.
This issue is important to you. Why? Is it important to you morally? Is it important to you legally? Or is it important to you just tactically? That's bad for Republicans going forward.
Actually, all three. I think that...
State them in your order of priority.
So morally, I think that as an American, I think it is absolutely essential that we follow the rule of law. And that one of my heroes, Ronald Reagan, said the peaceful transfer of power is absolutely critical to the form of government. And we are unique in the world in the way that we transfer power. There are other countries that have done it for short periods of time, but nobody has done it for what is really the American experience. And so morally, I think it is critical that we get that transfer of power right. Even if you've got serious questions whether you won an election or not, you got to give it up and live to fight another day.
See Nixon, Richard, see Gore, Al.
On and on.
To name just two
right
relatively contemporary examples.
Right.
Who as vice president presided over the process by which the election was certified and they were deemed the loser.
Right. Yeah, and
not an easy thing to do in politics,
right.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Right.
A very difficult thing to do in politics.
Politically, having, as I mentioned before, those Republicans in a Joe Biden district and trying to run for re-election, it makes absolutely no sense to have the face of decertifying the election as our speaker at the same time that we will have the man who is demanding that the election be decertified as our candidate for president, which is a possibility.
Right. What does this temporizing and deflection tell you about Scalise and Jordan? That they're just terrified of telling the truth about this issue?
No, I don't think either one of them is terrified. I think what the reality is if they take a strong position on one side, they make 10 or more people mad. If They take a strong position on the other side. They make 10 or more people mad.
Isn't that the essence of politics?
Yeah, but they only have a 4-vote margin. So they're thinking of themselves. So they dissembled on every question. It wasn't just that question. They didn't want to make people mad on, I asked them both about Ukraine. Well, I want Ukraine funding. I want to see a plan. Well, the plan is that Russia loses. I mean,
Yes.
Ronald Reagan said that a long time ago. I win, you lose. That's the plan. And so we need to make sure that they're able to say.
And it's not as if the Ukrainians are saying, please come in here and defend our country. They're willing to take up arms. They
Nope.
train themselves incredibly fast on this technologically advanced systems, and they put them into the field right away.
And they are losing their lives every day because they've been invaded in an illegal war, and we're not willing to stand up and say, you know what, freedom is worth something. It's important.
Will your party, Congressman Ken Buck, ever get over this sickness of denialism about the 2020 election?
I think it will. It won't get over
What will
as-
it take?
as long as our leading candidate is the person who was the power, the force behind that denial. And so I think as Trump moves on, we will move on, whether that happens this primary election season or at some other point.
Do you want him to be the nominee?
I don't.
Will you support him if he is?
I am struggling with that question right now. I don't know that he is an existential threat to America, but I think that...
You think he's pretty close?
I think America could do a lot better.
Do you have a favorite that's not named Trump?
I have a favorite, 5 or 6 favorites right now.
And anyone but Trump?
Well, I don't know that everyone but Trump. I'm not a big Chris Christie fan either, but I certainly think that Mike Pence did the honorable thing on January 6th and showed a lot of backbone. I think that Nikki Haley has a great record in foreign policy.
Do you sense she's gaining momentum?
I do think she's getting momentum, and for good reason. On the stage, she's willing to speak clearly, bluntly, and tell the truth. I think that, Tim Scott is great. I think Ron DeSantis is great. So there are a number of candidates who would be very formidable opponents to Joe Biden.
Are you waiting eagerly for the possible arrival of Glenn Youngkin?
I think he's incredibly impressive.
Do you think the field needs a Glenn Youngkin?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I think we have a good field, but I think it's important to stay focused on the people who have been there. I mean, Glenn Youngkin's been governor for 2.5 years. That doesn't really qualify you to be president. You look at Nikki Haley, who has been governor for 8 years and then was, ambassador to the UN, I think. And she has foreign policy experience. She has governing experience. Tim Scott in the U.S. Senate dealing with foreign relations and other issues. DeSantis sat next to me in Judiciary Committee for 4 years. I know he was really on the ball in Congress as well as having been governor. I think did a great job in terms of dealing with
Are you
COVID.
surprised how hard a time he's had as a national candidate?
Yes, I am surprised by that. I don't think it's his fault. I think it's
You don't think it's his fault?
No, I think there's great candidates, and I don't think you don't point to one thing and say, oh, he stumbled here. I think it is just a very competitive field, and I think there's one guy who sucks up all the media with indictments and other things that it's very hard to overcome that.
So, we'll start this, and then we'll talk about it on the other side of the break. Your current sense of things, Israel and Hamas in Gaza.
What Hamas did was absolutely unforgivable. Israel has every right to defend themselves and make sure that Hamas is never in a position to attack again.
When it says it seeks to eradicate Hamas, you support that goal?
I absolutely support that goal. And any civilian deaths in Israel or in Gaza are the responsibility of Hamas. And the general public should understand that no country would tolerate what happened a week ago.
That there's no moral equivalence between a Palestinian civilian dying and the Israeli slaughtered on October 7th?
No, because that Palestinian civilian has got to get out of Gaza and has got to get out of the war zone that is going to be when the land invasion occurs.
And you expect that to occur at some point in the
I
not too
do
distant
expect
future?
that. There's a whole city underneath the city of tunnels that have housed...
Constructed by Hamas.
Right, that have
With
housed,
money that could have gone to the civilians.
for food, education, yes.
And so Israel has to go in take care of what's above ground and also what's beneath the ground, if I hear you correctly.
They are not going to risk lives for people just to go through and clear tunnels. They are going to destroy those tunnels. It's going to affect what happens above ground also.
Voice of Ken Buck, Republican Congressman from Colorado. Stay tuned for a segment for the Takeout in just 1 second.
The desire to take Hamas out completely, totally, so it does not ever exist again is the number one priority.
Welcome back. Continuing our conversation with Ken Buck, Republican Congressman from Colorado. Your assessment so far of President Biden's reaction to the situation in Israel and Gaza?
I think it's good. Generally, I think there have been some missed signals, and that's unfortunate. But I think for the most part,
are you glad he went to Israel?
Yeah, I think that's an important message for the region to send the President of the United States to a critical ally like Israel. I think is a very good message.
It will be perilous work if there is a ground invasion of Gaza. The Israeli soldiers will have to defend themselves as they move forward and as they turn back, because, as you mentioned, the tunnels beneath Gaza will allow Hamas fighters to pop up out of those tunnels and shoot Israeli troops from all sides. This will be grinding, bloody, block-by-block urban conflict. And when Israel says this war will not be short, what does that tell you?
Well, it tells me that they're realistic. It tells me that they know exactly the enemy that they're going up against. Israel has the best intelligence network. Obviously, a huge letdown in this particular situation when
Massive.
the attack
The biggest
occurred.
in its history.
Yeah, and I'm sure they're dealing with that right now. But they also have a lot of folks in Gaza right now who are telling them what's going on the ground.
What about the hostages?
Yeah.
The hostages are Israeli and American, according to everything we have been told and been able to discern so far. Is that a higher priority than a ground invasion?
It is incredibly sad if those hostages are still alive, and I'm sure some of them are.
You fear some are dead already.
I have to believe that some are, but the sadness is that if you allow Hamas to exist in any form, there will be hostages in the future. The desire to take Hamas out completely, totally, so it does not ever exist again is the number one priority.
Mm-hmm. The administration has talked about $10 billion as a supplemental for Israel. Is that enough? And do you think Congress, once organized, will be supportive?
I think Congress will be supportive. The problem that we face is we cannot continue to throw money at different. I mean, we're spending at a level that's far in excess of what Iran is spending or Russia is spending through Iran for Hamas and Hezbollah. So we have got to figure out a way in this country to be able to defend ourselves and have our allies defend their interests at a less expensive rate. This isn't the time to have that conversation, but it is a realistic goal of ours. We give Israel $3 billion every year. In addition, we give them military aid. All of that I support. But how do we do things that are less costly to the U.S.?
It strikes me, Congressman Ken Buck, that there is a sense that most Republicans in the House oppose aid to Ukraine. I don't think that's true when you do the numbers, is it?
We've had several votes. The last vote that we had, it was on, I think it was $300 million of aid that was in a defense bill. And 117 Republicans voted no, 90-something yes. So there were more no's than yeses. But I've talked to many of those Republicans who said, I will support this $40 billion aid package. There were other reasons to vote no on that.
Right.
So I think you're right.
That wasn't a clean Ukraine yes or no question.
And so the vote total will be, there will be a majority of Republicans in favor of a aid package to Ukraine.
And most Democrats clearly are as well. So there is substantial bipartisan support.
Yes.
It needs to get to the floor, though.
It needs to get to the floor, and that's one of the things that when I visited with Jim Jordan, he said, I want to make sure that we have an inspector general for Ukraine. I want to hear the president's plan. All that's great. We have now a task force of the Defense, State, and USAID inspector generals who are focused on that. We have Deloitte, who is auditing the aid that goes to Ukraine. There are a number of processes in place recognizing that Ukraine is a corrupt country. And we need to make sure that our money is used wisely.
A couple of senior government officials have been fired by the president over allegations of corruption. Zelensky is dealing with this. He is trying to be as good a steward as he can of this outside assistance from Europe and America, while also being a wartime president. It's not an easy thing to do.
It's not, and what's so interesting about it is part of the old Soviet system. If you look at where the Soviets withdrew, they all have this crisis of corruption because of how the Russian culture runs countries. And so, yes, it's bad. Yes, we've got to clean it up, especially if they're ever going to be part of the European Union or NATO. But now is not the time to have that debate. Now is the time to get Russia out of there and make sure we can help a potential ally.
What, Congressman Ken Buck, are the prospects for another government shutdown? As you mentioned, we have a deadline of November 17th coming to extend government funding, and without that, there'll be a shutdown.
I hope the prospects are zero.
I know you hope the prospects are zero. What does
you're asking me to predict,
tell you?
And I don't bet on horses for a reason, and I don't bet on this game either. And I can tell you that we have 30 days to get the job done. Jim Jordan has said he wants a CR so that we can go and finish all the rest of our appropriations bills. I think other candidates would take the same position, and it's likely that long before the shutdown, we have a CR that we send to the Senate.
Right, but to go back to where we started, you don't think Jim Jordan's going to be the speaker. You think there's going to be some other arrangement, and however that arrangement settles out, to be determined, ladies and gentlemen. As I said, this is a time-stamped show, so events may overtake us, but someone's going to have to make that decision about what the continuing resolution, that's how you keep the government funded at a designated spending level, what that number is and what the process is. Who's going to be that person?
Well, it may be Patrick McHenry, it may be
Scalise, it may be Jordan,
right.
It may be some combination.
But that the proposal by Jim Jordan has been widely accepted as a good strategy.
So whether he's speaker or not, that may be the template.
That's correct.
How does this all feel to you? Does it feel like something in American politics is being lost, or there's a particular waywardness about things right now, or does this feel just like a temporary phase that will blow over and is not of much consequence?
It feels like a swamp. It feels like there's a whole lot of special interest groups that want us to do things and get back to work. It feels like there's a lot of American people who are calling in wanting one thing or another. There are attacks from all sides at this point. And my job and the job of my colleagues is to make the right decision and move forward and make sure America knows we will do what we need to do.
Does it make you want to stay in Congress or do something else outside of Congress?
About the third day I got here, I wanted to do something else.
Do you want to be on television?
No.
The word is you want to be on television.
Yeah, I've heard that word.
Is that not true?
No. Look, I want to stay in the fight. I believe in the marketplace of ideas, and I want to be part of the marketplace of ideas. So however that looks, whether it's in a consulting capacity or whether it is in TV or radio or writing, articles, op-eds.
You're not announcing your retirement, are you?
I am not.
Are you going to run for re-election?
I am running for re-election right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So far as things stand right now.
That's correct.
Got it. Ken Buck, thanks so much for spending time with us. It's been a hectic day. As I said, it's October 18th. We'll see where things land by October 20th or 21st. I'm Major Garrett. We'll see you next week.
We have gained one member of Congress in Colorado, and that's largely due to the influx from California, and has largely changed the political dynamics in the state.
Welcome to your Takeout Outtake Especial. We're at Santa Rosa Taqueria. It's a good place to have the Especial, don't you think? And the phones just keep on ringing here on set. Ken Buck is our guest. Ken, tell me the best part of Colorado.
The best part of Colorado is the 4th Congressional District.
Of course it is. Can you be a little bit more specific?
So I represent the eastern plains of Colorado.
Yeah.
We not only have a beautiful view of the mountains, we also
You can see the mountains,
We can
yes.
see the mountains. We also produce the food and
see
the energy.
Kansas, too.
Well, kind of like Sarah Palin could see Russia, but not as well. But yeah, we have a beautiful, hard-working group of people in the 4th Congressional District, and that's what makes it so special.
You wanted to run, and you did run for the Senate. Are you glad you're in the House and not in the Senate?
I wanted to make a difference, and I'm doing my best to make a difference, whether it's in the Senate or the House. I can't. The nice thing about the Senate is it's a 6-year term. The nice thing about the House is it's a place where McConnell and Schumer don't rule.
Actually, no one rules right now.
Yeah, that's a good point. Chaos
It's a
reigns.
free fall. It's a free for all. We ask everyone on the show. This show's been going on for 7 years, Congressman Ken Buck. These 3 questions. Take them in whichever order you prefer. Most influential book in your life and why? Favorite movie? Way to think about that is, say you're scrolling and you see it, you almost automatically stop because it's a movie you just have to watch, even if it's midway through. And if you're driving in the 4th District of Colorado or taking a long flight and you're really going to enjoy some music, I mean really enjoy it, what artist or genre is that most likely to be?
You know I can't remember 3 things at once, but I'll
Give it a go.
I'll do my best. I guess movie is Gladiators.
Okay. Why?
You know, it just has a lot of good messages in it.
Epic story.
Yeah. Best book is clearly Bible. I read it, if not every day, 5 times a week, and it has had the most impact on my life. The second most impactful book was a book I read in college, and it was Doris Kearns Goodwin's book about LBJ. And I just thought it was fascinating how someone so screwed up could get to the top. And now I look at all my colleagues, I'm thinking, I figured this out now.
Yeah.
There is something that drives people to do, not to spend time with their family, not to spend time playing golf, but
Tower of Ambition and Personal Drive,
Yeah.
LBJ.
And did you say my favorite place?
Music.
Music. I don't listen to much music, but I would tell you that probably the Eric Clapton, sort of the music I grew up with in the 70s is probably
Rock singer-songwriters of the 70s.
Yeah.
They don't have that channel on Sirius XM, but maybe they'll get that there someday. You said you might want to stay involved, whether it's in TV or consulting. Do you ever want to be governor of Colorado?
No.
No.
And there's not a Republican governor in the next 20 years in
There
Colorado.
isn't.
No.
What's happened in Colorado? How would you describe in shorthand the transformation of the state? Because it used to be competitive, and for a while, it was reliably Republican, particularly in presidential years.
Yeah, it was.
Is that all about Denver?
No, it's all about California.
Okay.
California has gotten so screwed up that people have there's kind of this diaspora.
You know you're talking to a native San Diegan, okay?
San Diego may be the last bastion of common sense in California, but for the most part, California has gone through this diaspora where Texas has got a bunch of them, and Idaho, and the liberal Northern Californians have moved to Colorado, and
therefore changed the politics.
Changed the politics. Each of the last 2 decades, we have received an extra member of Congress. We have gained 1 member of Congress in Colorado, and that's largely due to the influx from California, and has largely changed the political dynamics in the state.
Do you think if Trump is the nominee, he can beat President Biden?
It's interesting. I think Trump's the only person who could lose to Biden, and Biden is the only person who could lose to Trump. So I don't know who wins that race.
Are you convinced they will both be the nominees?
I'm not. I think neither of them will be the nominee.
Actually, you and I both agree on that. I don't know how. You don't either. But something tells you and me that this is a much more fluid situation
I have
than
faith
it currently
in the American
appears.
people. I have faith.
So concludes your Takeout Outtake Especial. I'm Major Garrett. That was Ken Buck. We'll see you next week.